Vendor risk management, 6 basic questions. If your company is like most organizations, you're probably using a growing number of vendors to support your business. These vendors likely perform a wide variety of functions such as operations, providing supplies, processing financial transactions, managing your website, and performing building services. While these arrangements are great, they can also introduce risks to your company. Today, companies need to be concerned about breaches, data exposure, and regulatory non-compliance. How do you get your arms around such a complex issue? If your company uses vendors, then you need to ask yourself 6 basic questions. The first one is, does your company currently perform vendor management? If they do, then you're one step ahead. The next step is to find out what information is being collected. It also makes sense to partner with the internal group that leads this effort. That way you can influence the questions that are being asked and understand what information is being analyzed. If there is no vendor management program in place, then your company may have a high level of active and unmanaged risk. Number 2, who are your key vendors? Not all vendors have the same level of importance. Companies can use some basic techniques to figure out who are the most critical vendors. Here are some basic questions to help make that determination. Does the vendor have access to any sensitive data? Does the vendor store or host sensitive data on their IT systems? Does the vendor have access to data that could result in harm if stolen? If this vendor suffers a data breach, will that require reporting? If the vendor suffers a significant outage, would your company activate its business continuity plan? Number 3, what risks do you want to measure? It's difficult to capture information about vendor risk without first understanding what you want to assess. Once you know that, you'll be able to ask the right questions for your vendor risk assessments. Here are some categories to be considered in your vendor assessment: cybersecurity, legal, regulatory, privacy, information technology, business continuity. Number 4, how do I start to manage vendor risks? If nobody owns vendor management in your organization, you will need to find the answers to some more questions. For example, where will the responsibility fall? Does your team have the required expertise? Does your team have the capacity to manage vendor risk appropriately? If you're not sure about the answers to these questions, then you should explore augmenting your capabilities through knowledgeable consultants or a managed service provider that specializes in this area. Number 5, what tools should I use to make this easier? Spreadsheets and documents can be useful, but tracking vendor risk information might require a more sophisticated approach. Selecting the right tool will provide you with better data management and can also help to automate the process with vendors. Another important factor to consider is how to exchange documentation securely with a vendor. Number 6, what do I do with all this information? Remember, the purpose of vendor risk management is not to check a box and say we did it. You want a desired outcome, such as eliminating a vulnerability or mitigating a known risk. As you become better at understanding risk, it can be used to make informed decisions about whether to work with specific vendors. When you understand your vendor relationships better, they become partners in risk management. Getting a handle on your company's vendor risks can be a challenge, but it doesn't have to be an insurmountable one. By thinking about the items discussed today, you can tackle this complex issue and reduce risk that your company is exposed to by vendors. For more information, or if you need assistance with your vendor risk management program, please contact us at info@quintillionconsulting.com.